I don't want to keep you very long. And it is hot, and it's just unusual. Yesterday, when I was out in the backyard picking up walnuts, anybody needs walnuts, let me know. But I felt like a state fair day, not September. It felt more like it was the middle of August in Iowa. And for me, hearing the cicadas singing and just beastly hot, the leaves are falling. It just felt like I was at the Iowa State Fair. So this morning, we're still kind of studying this book. What are we fighting for? And it's a book that Tom Binkerton has put together, and he began the second chapter with a story about vacationing when he was growing up. And I just remember one particular vacation that we had as a family. Our kids were young at that time, and we frequently went out to Rocky Mountain National Park. And so we had to travel through that awful, awful state of Nebraska. And I will say that in traveling there and on our vacation, it was one of the bonding experiences we had as a family, and we had a wonderful time of spending together. If you know Janet and I, you understand that I appreciate her very much. And what we do is we work as a team, and we have some very, very cleanly defined roles that we have as husband and wife and father and mother. And it was very quickly understood that when we had a girl, Janet was to potty train the girl, and if we had a boy, I was supposed to potty train the boy. And so when our boy Tommy was about 2 years old, Janet reminded me that that was my role. So I decided that vacation would be a wonderful time to try this. I would be with him and around him and such. And then if you know Nebraska very well, they have the rest stops about every 30 miles. You can always count on them. They're always there. They're very clean. And so I decided that I was going to potty train Tommy on vacation. So we made our way, and when we would approach a rest stop, we would stop automatically, whether we had to go or not. And my theory was I was just going to encourage him, and so we'd get out of the car and say, "Come on, Tommy, it's time to go. Now you can do it. You can make it." And we would run to the restroom, and whether he had to go or not, if he went, he was rewarded. If he didn't, I'd say, "Give me a high five. We'll just try it again." So we took 2 days to get by Nebraska and through it to get to Colorado. But anyway, in that vacation, I was successfully succeeded in getting Tommy potty trained. I will admit that's true. Janet is saying that is true, and so it was all that encouragement of you can make it, you can do it, you can make it, Tommy, you can do it. Well, on the way home after we had camped for a week at Rocky Mountain National Park, we came back through Denver. And when we hit Denver, we hit it right at the rush hour, and we hit what is called the mousetrap, where 3 interstates come together at once, and then they go off their own separate ways. It is crazy nuts, and there I am with Janet trying to help me, guide me through this thing, and the 3 kids in the back seat, and the car is just full of tents and camping stuff and everything, and we're making our way, this small town kid trying to get our way through Denver when kaboom! The tire blows, and we're right on that, in the middle of that mousetrap. And I quickly get the car over wrestling it over to the shoulder, and pull up. And I'm thinking to myself as the cars are just buzzing on by, and wondering what am I going to do? And the flat tire was out on the highway, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to get out there. I'm going to die, and I'm going to take the family with me. But I'm sitting there and then think, well, I'll just slowly drive this down the shoulder till we finally find an exit and pull off, and I'll get that change. So that was a great idea. We pulled for a little while, just kind of tugging along as the cars were passing by. But then we ran into a DOT truck that was just parked right there for no reason, had stopped, and I couldn't get out in front of them, and I was stopped. And I said to Jen, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how we're going to get out of this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was scared, really, honestly. I had the kids there, thought about getting them out of the car, walking them. I didn't know what to do because I was afraid. And out of the back seat, Tommy said, "You can do it, Daddy. You can make it. You can do it, Daddy. You can make it." It was those words of encouragement that we have never forgotten, and has been a great bonding with Tommy. Janice, it was but it is those same words that I want to bring to our denomination. In a time when we're feeling a chasm that is wide as and deep as the Grand Canyon, I believe that we can do it and we can make it by remembering what we're about and what we are doing as a church and what our role is. This morning, I want to look at Paul's letter to Romans, and in it are these words that give us an idea of unity and harmony, that we should be working together, and we'll reflect on that. May the God of steadfastness and encouragement grant you to live in harmony with one another. May God's love and encouragement help us live in harmony with one another, in accordance with Jesus Christ, so that together you may, with one voice, glorify the God and Father of your Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. So together and with one voice we may glorify God, which is our job. That's the church's responsibility. That's who we are. That one and working together is we are stronger, and we make a more impressive witness of Christ. I'm a Monty Python fan, and I have all of the movies, and I've brainwashed my kids, and so when we're home for Christmas, we sit down and watch one or two of them, and one of my favorites is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's really very sacrilegious kind of film, but it's a wonderful film where it takes those stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and just has that English comedy twist in it that you have to have a certain kind of personality and understanding to get into it. But there is a crowd that has gathered, and they have found what they say is a witch. And they bring it up to one of the knights, and they bring this witch up to the knight, and they say, "We want to burn her! We want to burn her!" Well, how do you know that she's a witch? "Well, she looks like a witch. Let me see her." And so they bring this woman up, and you can tell that she was dressed up to look like a witch. I think they went, if there was a Dollar General back then, they went there and got the worst witch's costume they could find during Halloween. And she had one of those funnels on her head and a nose that was about this long that was tied on with a piece of string. You could tell that she was not a witch. He says, "Well, let me see here." And he said, "Look, she's got a wart. She's got a wart. And look at that." And you could tell it was all fake. And so finally he says, this can't be a witch. You just look at her. She can't be a witch. But they kept saying, "Burn her, burn her, burn her, burn her. This can't be a witch. It doesn't look like a witch. You can't burn her because she is not a witch." So the crowd always kind of winds around, and finally they're leaving, and they say, "But can we still burn her?" Can we still burn her? Well, we are so judgmental. It's part of our human nature. We judge people by the teams that they watch, whether they're Hawkeyes, Panthers, or Cyclones. We judge people by the cars they drive, where they live, what kind of clothes they wear, how they speak. If they speak funny, like somebody from Georgia, and such. But it's who we are. It's our human trait of judging people by our first impressions, judging people by who they hang out with. The thing is that is kind of normal, except we're abnormal as Christians. Abnormal in the sense that once we have had Christ in our lives, we then are to live by a different standard, where we love one another, even our enemies, where we love our friends and we help with kindness. Christians are, in a sense, abnormal compared to the way the world goes. And the sad thing is that we often judge people without really getting to know them. In Paul's letter to Romans, in the midst of that, he's working with a church he has not visited, with Christians that he has not visited, but he knows that they are having a crisis. And for us to ask ourselves, even though this is the first generation of Christians, they still had their issues. It wasn't one big happy family. And what Paul is addressing in his letter to the Romans were basically issues that is dividing the church at this time. It's the division between the Gentiles and the Jews. Those who were Jews before they became Christians, who understand the way things are, and then the Gentiles who had no clue about what it was to be a Jew. Well, the Jews were those who were saying, well, this is the way it's got to be. And particularly when they were talking about their dietary rituals and also about the understanding of the Sabbath. And their excuses were, this is the way it's been and this is the way it's always going to be. We've heard that in the church. This is the way it is always going to be. No opportunity to change or to welcome or to help. Their dietary rules were made, and yet they were still practicing. And when the Gentiles looked for it, they didn't understand it. And one of those issues is that those Roman Christians were surrounded by pagan temples. And each one of the pagan temples were a place where people could go sacrifice animals in order to get a favor of that god. But on the backside of these pagan temples were the butcher shops. So they had this good thing going right there in Rome. And for the Gentiles and the Romans, they were just being very practical. You come in, you buy a lamb and have it sacrificed in your name that maybe things will go well with your crop or something like that. And then they go and they slaughter the lamb and then they butcher it and put it for sale in the meat market behind the temple. So what they were doing was just something very practical. Let's not waste this meat. Let's put it out for sale. So they made the money off of the lamb and then in both ways. They had it coming and going, literally. Well, the Jews really had trouble with that. The Jews really struggled with that because what it was is these animals were sacrificed for idols. And to eat the sacrifice for idols was something that was totally unreligious. It was something that was the worst thing that they could do to God, in the sense of insulting God by eating this meat that had been dedicated to other gods and to pagan gods. But for the Gentiles, they said, what's the big deal? We've been doing this all of our lives and nothing has happened. And so there was this tension over the use of eating sacrificed meat to idols. The other big one that Paul was addressing was their understanding of Sabbath. Now, for the Jew, the Sabbath was understood as a day of rest where you did nothing. You did all the food preparation the day before and you did no work. And believe me, even in this day, when you go to Jerusalem and you're there at the hotels, those of you who've been with us at the hotels in Jerusalem, you don't want to get on the elevator that is designated for the Jews on their Sabbath, because every button is lit up. And so it stops at every floor, because for them it's work to push the button on the elevator, and there's no work. So if you get on that elevator by mistake, you're going to be seeing every floor, and you'll be saying hello to a lot of people and such. But that's for them. But for the Gentiles, who lived in a society that did not understand the Sabbath and understand its importance for rest, but saw it just as another day of work, it was a struggle to understand why they were making such a big deal about the Sabbath and keeping it. So Paul was trying to address this issue between them that was making them into two different factions over the Sabbath and over meat that had been dedicated to pagan gods. And what he addressed to them was basically, why are you fighting over these little things? How dare you judge for each other, against each other? Put these little things aside and do what you're called to do. to glorify God and make disciples of Jesus Christ. That is what you are supposed to do. Not to fight over these little things, but more importantly, that as one in harmony with one another in the name of Jesus Christ, your witness of being able to work together will make a difference in how you witness to the community of Rome. For Paul, you could hear the sadness as you read through this part of Romans, the discouragement and the disgust that these Christians were fighting over the little things that really did not matter. But for the Jews, it was, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is right. But for the Gentiles, they said, we're being saved by grace by Jesus Christ. Can't we put that aside and spend our time doing other things like witnessing? So Paul was trying to bring them together. It has been a fight with Christianity ever since we began. And so why I bring this up is basically, what does this mean for us? You know, I can't remember the last time I went and bought food at the back of a pagan temple. I can't. I do remember buying a hot dog at Kinnick Stadium at one time. But I don't remember ever doing that. And the struggle with the Sabbath is that after this time, the Sabbath has changed even in our lifetime. Now Sunday is like any other day of the week. When I was growing up, you couldn't buy anything, maybe gas, but that was about it. But what it is for us to listen to is that it's important for us to hear that the church has always been divided, but it's oftentimes in the small things that get in the way, that disturb people enough that our churches are weakening and not being strengthened, and we're not able to make that witness of Christ of working together. I use this illustration with Matt frequently because he's wearing blue jeans this morning. But one of the biggest fights I ever had in church was over blue jeans about 20 years ago when my kids were about 10, 12 years old. And when the kids started wearing blue jeans to church and the fuss and the fight that we had, how disrespectful they are in the way that they dress, that they should be dressed to come to church with their best because they only do and give to God what is best. And the fight that I had is that there were those that would insult and would ridicule the kids for wearing jeans. Matt, you're wearing jeans and you're embarrassing me. No. But it was terrible. And what I basically was preaching on is if we should be grateful that we have children and youth in church. We should be happy that they're here, and what they're seeing and experiencing is that you can't accept me for what I'm wearing, blue jeans, then you can't accept me for who I am. And so what happened was that we ended up losing the battle between the kids. The kids didn't feel welcome, they didn't feel accepted. And if you look around, we don't have that many children. It was a battle that was won and lost by the fact that we were thinking that we were doing the right thing. But it was a little thing that made a big difference to those who were seeking entrance into the church, who wanted to be a place where they were accepted and loved. You see, the temple and the synagogues were really houses of judgment. You went there and you were feeling bad. You felt that you had to lay before God a sacrifice. You felt as though you were so low that you had to crawl under the door to leave. Where the churches were all about mercy and grace. Houses of mercy and grace. A church that is a church of judgment is one that really doesn't have a door handle on its front. You have to knock on that door, and if you know the password or you know the litmus test to come in, they will let you in if you are like them. A house of mercy and grace are a church that has a welcoming committee that greets you, welcomes you, and lets you in. Allows you to be a part of this. And if they're not there, they're out looking for people who need to find that place where they are welcomed and loved and encouraged in life. You see, what Paul is talking about is that we have to be careful about how we judge one another. As he says, we're all a project yet to be completed. That God is not done with us, and we all have our issues and our problems, and that we shouldn't be judging one another. As he says to the Romans, how dare you judge one another? There's a pastor that called on a woman, and she had just been in the hospital, come home and recovering. He stopped in, they went into the living room, and they were sitting, and they were talking about, how long her recovery would be, and how is she doing, and how is that, and then the woman just suddenly gets up, and I said, Pastor, I want you to come and see this. I want you to come see this. Look at my neighbor's laundry. It's hung out, and look how filthy that laundry is. It's just terrible. I would be embarrassed about hanging laundry like that for all my neighbors to see. But it looks like she didn't even wash it. She just keeps hanging it over and over again. Well, Pastor got kind of uncomfortable and said, let's pray, and I'll go on my way. So as they were leaving, and he said prayer, and as they went out the door, they both were looking back, and she was starting to point out that the woman's laundry was just as filthy as ever, and both of them could see that laundry, those sheets were as white as snow. They were perfect, and what she realizes was her windows were filthy. We should not judge others, for two, our lives have its own problems. We have our own struggles. None of us are perfect. We're all projects in the work in which God is continuing to work for us. And that's where I believe the church is essential to all of us. That we're all fallen short. And we come to feel that grace and mercy where we're welcomed, encouraged in life, and accepted by his love. Tom Bickerton, when he's trying to lift people up, he said there's basically 3 words that need to be shared. You are loved. 3 words that are important about our gospel, that the gospel speaks. Simple words. You are loved. They're words that give us hope. They're words that give us the assurance in the midst of the storms of our lives. They're the words that we're reminded that God will not abandon us in our life. And those are the words that the world so desperately needs to hear. You are loved. This morning, as we are reminded ourselves what we are called to do, and that is to go and make disciples, that we together working together with cooperation and would make a difference in this world. My words are to you, you can do it, and you can make it. Make it be so. Amen.